Hi, this is Mike making my video. Uh, it's 8:30 a.m. and it's 4/15/2025. So yeah, I'm making this video. I pretty much got to the point where I find that things are absurd as far as creation is concerned. Uh, you know, I sit at the pinnacle of creation. There really isn't there really isn't much more uh, left after this. I've seen the spirit world, and people in that world are pretty much just as lost as we are. Uh, you know, I think there's people once they cross over to that side, they're more or less miserable because they find that there really is nothing more. Um, Ironically, that's really just ultimately what happens is we get to the other side and we yearn for coming back to this side, and then of course we're on this side and we yearn to go to that side. Some people are stuck on the modality that they want to always go on the other side. The grass is greener on the other side, but once they get there, they come to the realization that they had it pretty much as good as it gets as far as this side is concerned. So they exchange one East state for another, and they're exchanging one set of glories for another. So, you get to the point in life, when you pretty much surpass all that there is. Uh, you get to the point where there really is nothing more uh, left in this world, other than the fact that we become spiritual instead of physical. So in the spiritual sense, we experience it in probably you know probably a slightly younger version of ourselves, or maybe a smaller or larger version of ourselves. I'm not sure exactly how that particular thing works, but I've seen enough of it. I've seen enough spirits to know that ultimately we uh, get to that point, and we find out that there really is nothing more. They you get people that are so obsessed with trying to find what's behind everything. They pierce the veil. They want to, and I have pierced the veil, and I've seen that things just disappear. Spirits, physical objects, uh, you know, this world and the one above it pass away. So ultimately, they both pass away. Uh, I think with considering how many people have died before me and how many spirits there would be populating the ether, that when I enter in, you would venture to say that there would be so many spirits that it would be just incalculable. But I think that ultimately, I think spirits, there's very few that do exist, and I think a lot of people either get destroyed or they just never manifest as a spirit. Um, Unfortunately. So anyway, yeah, it's an absurd existence. If you think about it, we shit and we piss and we suffer, and we have minds that are very powerful, but the thing is, sometimes we lack in other ways, you know. Not all people are really geniuses, but, maybe there's a lot of people, that never really become anything, you know, and, they're more or less losers. So, anyway, that's really ultimately all there is to that. But, you think about it, you get to the point where like me, for example, I've seen everything there is to see and been everything there is to be. And, of course, I've done everything there is to do that I'm comfortable with. I've performed every miracle you can imagine almost. And, with that being said, there really is not a whole lot left as far as things go. So anyway, that's how that works. But, everything is absurd. You think about it, there's so many life forms that come into being, let's say the dodo bird or whatever, and they never, let's say it took a billion years or whatever for that thing to manifest in fullness or for whatever form, and then, maybe it lasts for a while and the human race destroyed it. And, those things that come into being, some of them are only in existence for a short period of time, some kind of bug or something, but they're in existence for a short period of time. You have the great diversity of things, but then you think about all the life forms that never really came to be anything. And the very sliver, the very small amount of creation that comes to the point where they become human. And not only that, the very few of those humans that actually breach the threshold between physical and spiritual. So, if you think about it, how rare it is. And, of all the things there is, it's just like you see, I see a lot of perfection in creation, don't get me wrong. But it's just like, but you see that everything's absurd. For example, I'm 55, and all the things I've had to go through to get to this point, of today, of now, this moment of now. All the things prior to this, all the suffering I had to endure, and all the things I had to endure to get to this point. There really is, it's mind-boggling. And you come to the point where you find that there really is not a whole lot left to explore. And there's very few things left. And you get to the point where, there isn't much left after this existence. Is this our last existence? Is this the last hoopla there is? And, I've always said that to myself, I pretty much want to go through everything and get to the point where I experience the last hoopla. And it's like, I've gotten to that point, and, there just isn't anything left. And, it's not like, I don't care necessarily, but honestly, if you think about it, it's like you see the incongruencies and everything, and you see like we're human, and we're gonna die. We're gonna become spiritual, but then again, maybe spiritual, you go back to being born again at some point. Your soul gets recycled. I don't know exactly. But, I would venture to say that's probably what it is. And, the superposition, of everything, the multi-worlds of everything, maybe we are all, like, we're all one. in the sense of the word, that we're all pretty much the same. We come from the same inheritance, and we all have the same mind, in a sense. You know, say you got 8 different types of archetypes, and or even 12 or whatever, but you know, we're ultimately all human, and we all think alike in a lot of ways. And there really is a lot of diversification in the way we think, but truth be said, you know, we are all one. And so, with that being said, you know, it's like, you know, honestly, what else is there? You know, I've seen things disappear, and spirits disappear. I've seen people disappear in the flesh. I've seen physical objects, buildings disappear. You know, and it's ultimately just a very, it's a video game that we're playing, and we are Pixar cartoons. It's just, you know, we're more advanced, we're more refined, and you know, it's just the thing is, we're in an interactive video game. That's really what it is. We're pixelated, and you know, the light establishes itself. You know, they got that video game from the 70s or whatever, the 80s, called The Game of Life, and it shows how, you know, things form and they create themselves, and then to the point where, you know, they become more advanced. But the thing is that's really just a video game. And then you consider, well, that, you know, filters over, bleeds through into this world. You know, this world's just a video game. And then, of course, you play video games like Minecraft, or you walk through walls, and, you know, that's a very basic example. But the thing is how does that differ from this? In a lot of ways, this is just a lot more advanced. So ultimately, it's just a video game. You know, when you put in the prompts, and you put in the rules and the boundaries and this and that, and then you find out that you find a way to break free from the prison, and you find out that it's all just a video game. That's really ultimately what it is. It's a very advanced, very persistent illusion. So, you know, when they say meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless. It's just chasing after the wind. I mean, that's the way it is. It's all vanity. It's everything's on the surface of what you see. But then you consider all those things, what you see, and you see that that world disappears. The physical, the world of form. And, you know, it's ultimately just, it's an illusion. I mean, I've met people that were archetypes, you know, that were godlike. But the whole idea, everyone's a star, I mean, so, you know, really what I got to say is that I'm an atheist. You know, I believe there are gods, yeah, I mean, but one God that created everything? No, I don't believe that. And, you know, I don't believe in one, you know, villain called the devil. You know, I mean, there's all kinds of devils, there's all kinds of demons, and there's all kinds of gods. So, I mean, it's just, if you think about it, we're all gods, you're all gods, and so it's just easier to say I'm an atheist. I pretty much believe in the scientific method, but even the scientific method, the only one that makes any sense is quantum theory. So it's all an illusion. It's a video game. It's that it's a simulation. It's that simple, plain as day. And we're living in a illusory world. It's an illusion, and it's just more or less an interactive video game. You put the goggles on, you play the game, and eventually it gets to the point where you take the goggles off. I've done that, and everything just disappears. When you're not looking at it, it doesn't exist. If a tree falls in the woods in Russia, you know, if it doesn't make a sound and nobody's there to see it, does it even exist? I mean, that's really the thing I'm trying to say, is that it's all just a simulation. It's all an illusion.